express ourselves and express the ways in which we see things differently, and notice how catalyzing difference is to a conversation. How if we're just simply always harmonizing with each other, there's a quality of complacency that sets in. However, if we're just constantly differing, and that there lacks that depth and cohesion and that wonderful feeling of relaxation and bonding. So basically, we wanted to introduce a fundamental principle, which I think a principle that's really important to understand in terms of conversation, particularly conversations that are heated or where there are, more disagreement in our views. And I'm thinking, because you practice Aikido, that this principle is one that's already going to be quite familiar to you. And this is really the art of experiencing oneness and the art of experiencing two-ness at the same time. And so in our work, we talk about sameness and how important it is to really cultivate the sameness in relationship and in conversation, and also to cultivate the difference. Because the sameness, if you will, the oneness, the feeling that we're not different and that there's no separation between us, in a certain way is like the bass and the drums in music. It's the through line. It's what makes it possible. If there isn't enough sameness in a room, usually the room is too anxious and people are a little bit too threatened to really have what feels like a potent and powerful conversation. On the other hand, when there's an overabundance of sameness, people will often report feeling bored, not feeling challenged enough. And so difference, how it is that we, express ourselves and express the ways in which we see things differently, and notice how catalyzing difference is to a conversation. How if we're just simply always harmonizing with each other, there's a quality of complacency that sets in. However, if we're just constantly differing, and that there lacks that depth and cohesion and that wonderful feeling of relaxation and bonding. And keep in mind that the experience of sameness and difference is not a concept. It's an actual embodied experience in which your nervous system is actually reading the situation all the time. So a nervous system that feels relaxed, a nervous system that feels that it belongs, a nervous system that doesn't sense threat, basically we call it the feed and breed function, right? It's just that there's an element of safety and openness and availability in the nervous system that happens when one senses this deep quality of sameness. And keep in mind that our meditation practice is designed not to simply give us the experience of the sameness of our humanity, but the sameness of everything in the universe, the underlying strata or the ground of being. That when we experience that quality of unitive experience, we're extremely at home in the universe. And yet the universe evolves through differentiation. One of all of our great influences is Ken Wilber, and he says that basically at first there's nothing, and then there's something that begins to appear, and the something is quarks, and then those quarks coalesce and become something else. They form into atoms, and then atoms hang out being the same, and then suddenly when they coalesce, a difference arises, and that difference is a molecule. Molecules become cells, cells become organs and organisms, and pretty soon we have the universe, we have life, we have evolution. So we don't grow without difference. And that's why it's important that we learn to work with our differences, that we learn to express them and to integrate them. That is how the universe evolves. That is how our brain evolves. It creates new neural pathways. Those neural pathways are integrated. So life itself is this beautiful expression, as is music, as is cooking, as is Aikido, in terms of oneness and the way we grow through the encounter with our differences. So what we want you to understand is that within the realm of communication, that listening creates sameness All you have to do to create more soothingness, more togetherness in any conversation is to use your listening skills. And that expression, individual expression, and particularly the expression of difference, is catalyzing, is exciting, and if it's not moderated, will become threatening. The fight or flight system in the nervous system will be activated, and pretty soon the whole palette of chemicals in your body will be different, and you'll be drinking adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. And that's a very, very different experience that primes you to run. So our premise is sameness is soothing, listening is the skill, difference is exciting, expression is the skill. And so Kim is going to open up by reading a little bit from our book about listening and then talking about how it creates sameness. Go ahead.
Thanks, Diane. Hi, everyone. Really happy to see your face and be here. So I'm going to read from chapter 2, What We Have in Common. We believe that a conversation about our differences should begin and end with an acknowledgement of the myriad ways we are the same. Talking about our differences is urgent, exciting, and even dangerous. But our commonalities appear to be so numerous as to be beside the point, part of the status quo, or so obvious that talking about them might be predictable, boring, or even worse, sentimental. It's difficult to see with fresh eyes and appreciate the depth and span of how much we all share. Diane's 30-year-old son, Willie, who has Down syndrome, has a particular fascination with what we have in common. He never takes it for granted. In fact, he remarks on the commonalities he sees around him all the time. Once, when he and Diane were watching The Wizard of Oz together, he said somewhat out of the blue, "You and Daddy have that in common." "What do we have in common?" she asked him, not following his train of thought. "You are both scared of the Wicked Witch. You have that in common." Once he commented as they were driving past a golf course, "Mark, Mariani, and Uncle Rick play golf too, with Dad. They have that in common." "True enough," she said. Upon hearing the news that his sister's old dog had died, Willie observed, "Mr. Apple and Allie are 2 dogs who died already. And now Maggie. That is something in common." "Sure is," Diane said, "and it's really sad." When he heard Diane talking in somber tones on the phone to his aunt about his 20-year-old cousin's recent cancer diagnosis, Willie said, "You are just like Daddy and myself. We are both worrying about Stella because we have that in common." "You're right about that, Willie." Willie recites these commonalities frequently. Some are delightful and some are devastating, but Diane appreciates that he points them out because she often fails to notice them herself. She says she forgets that she and her ex-husband have something in common, but it's true, they're both scared of the Wicked Witch. It helps when we are struggling with other people to remember how much we have in common. We are all born into human form and we will all die someday, not knowing how we arrived here or when the day will come that we will pass on. We can see that we all eat to survive, knowing how good food tastes, especially when we're really hungry, and that we all drink water to stay alive. And on a very hot day, we prefer nothing more. We can recall that we all have hopes and dreams. We all seek warmth when it's cold and a comfortable place to lie down at night. We all tend to cluster with our own style of people, those who share our values, habits, and sense of humor. Every single one of us has experienced deep pain or loss and illness of some kind, and each of us has had our heart broken in one way or another. The Dalai Lama says, "As human beings, we are all the same. We all want happiness and we do not want suffering." We would add that even as we've been hurt, we have also hurt others. As Willie would say, we have that in common. So, thanks for listening along. I wanted to just share a little story about how this was in my life about 2 days ago in a way that brought me connection and kind of some delight. I was on the phone to my father, and we've tried to speak most weekends, especially since COVID times, just to really be present to our relationship. And this week I was coming to the conversation with actually some kind of excitement or desire in me to share something that was going on with me just in my personal life. And as we were talking, time became more short because he was going out and I was making dinner, and he was just updating me on his week, and I was listening to him, and I could feel these little things happening in the center of my body, you know, like little baby impulses, like a kitten or something jumping inside a box every so often, just checking that that was still there, which was that we were actually talking about something else. And at a certain point, I recognized that it was taking me away from my experience of just being with him for what it was that he was sharing with me. And it's actually really delightful. He's been learning Chinese and French, and he was wanting to just share with me some of the funniness of him trying to navigate like irregular verbs and past and present and male and future. And I was able to really join with him and feel that kind of playfulness. And I, as a listening exercise, I wasn't even really reflecting back to him anything that I'd heard him say, but it was so real to me that he could feel that I was energetically with him. And for me to do that, it required me to just sort of inwardly stroke that little kitten and say, it's cool, we'll have another time. It's good. Like what's here is actually enriching. And so dropping those self-referential kinds of impulses and like ways of making sense of things that I was bringing allowed me to listen and be really present and actually receive a lot of joy from the moment. So listening is the skill that we really associate with this, you know, quality element of sameness, of oneness. And it was really beautiful to get to experience that, like with my father, just on a, you know, casual Sunday afternoon. So I think that's all I want to share about sameness. Diane, did you have anything you want to include?
Yeah, I think just one thing is I liked your image of that. Lots of times we have that little kitten jumping around in us, and so we don't listen because we have the kitten. And so I thought that was a beautiful image, just to say, got to soothe that kitten, you know, so you can actually be available to others. And we're going to do an exercise in a few minutes where you get to experiment with this sameness through listening and this difference through expression. So thanks, Kim. That was really beautiful. Great. Gabe.
Hello, gang. So we're going to swing you to the other side of the street, which is a little exploration on difference. Because you're embodied practitioners, we're going to hit you with some embodiment perspective as we explore difference. So this is from our chapter, An Exploration of Difference, chapter 3. And difference equals threat. So talking about our differences makes a lot of people uncomfortable, particularly if it means revealing our own private prejudices or looking at injustices in society. Most of us don't want to do it. It isn't that we simply aren't interested. It's that it creates real difficulties in the body. Like a finely tuned radar system, our nervous system picks up on the tiniest difference and responds in high contrast to how it does when we encounter familiarity and sameness. Surprising as it may be, just discussing differences often feels threatening. Conversations about differences can easily provoke a fight or flight response. Instead of a dose of relaxing, feel-good hormones, the rush of adrenaline and other stress hormones pervade the body, increasing the heart rate, flushing the skin, tightening the jaw and shoulder muscles, activating the limbs, and even inducing trembling. These are highly uncomfortable sensations. Sometimes people cry. There's often aggression or defensiveness in our voice. It is difficult to listen when there are stress hormones present in the body. Access to the prefrontal cortex is impeded, making it almost impossible to think clearly or hold multiple perspectives. Memory is affected too, sometimes making it difficult to remember that we actually like the person we're talking to. The evolutionary purpose of this bodily reaction is to provide a boost of energy for movement, for a quick defensive response, and for protection. Usually, when we feel triggered, our first impulse is to move away or defend. The spontaneous triggering of the fight or flight response is one reason we often have so little success talking when under its influence. Even though we may appear to be communicating, we're really coping with the uncomfortable stress in the body. We may be saying all the right things, but we remain fundamentally guarded, ready to attack or bolt. And to cope with that stress, We resort to domination, trying to convince others that we're right. We seek protection in our group, collapsing into a simple us versus them mentality. Or we withdraw completely because the stress hormone demands it. It is fight or flight after all. In all these ways, the body's ancient defense system rules the day. Finally, what makes difficult conversations even more difficult is that they often involve pain, and we don't like feeling pain. Whether it's the pain of recognizing suffering, or the pain of waking up to injustice, or the pain of feeling angry, guilty, or vulnerable, these are highly uncomfortable experiences in the body. It hurts to acknowledge pain, and it hurts to ignore it. The emotions that accompany the pain are also unwieldy. Some people don't want to talk about the issue because the issue is too overwhelming. Some don't want to be unfairly blamed or made to feel foolish. Others don't want to talk because it's dangerous to expose oneself and risk being labeled angry, troublesome, or bigoted. Others take the risk and feel their perceptions are minimized or denied altogether. And still, others are simply straight up aggressive in their expression, which always heightens the fight or flight response in others. So these attempts at talking can quickly become a hornet's nest of a conversation where everyone walks away feeling stung. Anyone relate? A little bit? So I think just to, re-presence what Diane said, the skill in terms of creating difference in the space is really your expression, and better yet, your first person expression. And I want to emphasize that because I have a couple of friends that are very abstract thinkers, and you never know what's actually happening for them. And I notice that when I am listening to them, I kind of start to just fade and get distracted. I am indulging my kitty to play with that metaphor. But when they're coming from their heart and they're really touched by something, there's something that captivates me in their sharing. It feels distinctly unique, personal, intimate. And so there's this wonderful opportunity in coming from your first person point of view and expressing you. Yeah. So maybe I'll just pause there, and maybe we'll turn it over to Diane. We'll model and do a little exercise.
Okay,
Dad, do you want to
great.
say?
Yeah. So I think the one thing I'd like to just reiterate, Gabe, is that the section we read is really focused on what happens in the nervous system when we start to differ. And keep in mind that the right amount of difference is exciting. So if you work on a team that has a deep bond and that collaborates well, when a difference enters the space for a group that's really bonded and sure of itself, that difference almost always creates energy, right? But but as we say, difference, we need difference. That's how the world evolves. That's how we grow. If you didn't encounter differences, you would never adapt. You'd be just complacently the same. And so differences are really, really important to our creativity. They're important to our love life. They're important. Our conflicts are important. So difference is a really, really important thing, but it's kind of a narrow window between just the expression of difference and when it becomes threatening. And I also think we need to acknowledge some cultural differences. So I live in Salt Lake City in the States. The Mormons live here where I live, and they're quite conflict averse, so it gets threatening much quicker here when you don't harmonize. But in New York City, I think much like Tel Aviv, people actually are used to expressing differences and can kind of tolerate the excitement of it before it becomes threatening for a bigger window. So depending on your personal relationships, your family culture, the culture of origin, where you live in the world, the bandwidth for tolerating difference might be narrow or it might be quite broad. But the basic point is still the same, that when it crosses into threat, it's much more difficult to manage. Does that make sense to everybody as a kind of a working idea? All right, so what we're hoping to do is to now give you an embodied experience. And well, maybe I should pause for questions now, Miles, and any comments from you, because we've got plenty of time in terms of our schedule. So we could take a few questions and anything that you want to tie into Aikido would be welcome at this moment, and then we'll model the exercise.
First, I feel so relaxed listening to you guys, and what I hear is like it's like the sameness thing, and I think that the other thing that occurred to me is that, I mean, I know Diane pretty well. I know Gabe somewhat, and first time I'm meeting Kim, but I assume it's the same, that we all have this kind of, our orientation in many ways, probably not every way, but in many ways is actually towards that, the energy of difference. Because that's where the creativity, that's where we kind of grow into a greater sameness. And just, I guess what occurred to me, while I was listening to everybody, was that it's so easy to become polarized. All of these things it's just so simple to go into polarization, and it takes really, really special conditions. And if we just kind of tie that into Aikido, awareness is primary and connection is secondary, in a way that we have to have the capacity to hold. In a way, when we create awareness, we're resting in sameness, I guess, if we stick with this frame, and that gives us the space to accept or to be with the other, to the point where it becomes uncomfortable. And then how do we deal with that energy is really where Aikido's at. And the Aikido solution is actually where that energy wants to go. Mm-hmm. It's not where I want it to go, which might be either into more sameness or more difference. It's not where the other wants it to go. It's actually when we interface and we manage to hold those conditions and listen, like you beautifully said, with our speak and listen from the heart, we manage to hold those conditions, the energy will go towards wholeness.
Yes.
But it requires the difference with the sameness, and that's what's so beautiful there.
Yeah, it's the exact same principle in group conversation. For those of you who've studied with me in the Integral Facilitator, we're always just listening for where the energy wants to move, and the energy is almost always in the service of the whole. Very well said.
Always in the service of the whole. Beautiful.
Yep. Good. Any other questions, anybody, before we do the exercise?
Well, no hands are up. Again, I don't see if you're raising your hand physically, I don't see it. But if anybody does have a question, raise your hand electronically. If not, we will go. I've set up the breakout rooms into groups of 3, Diane, if that's what you guys wanted.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so we're going to model the exercise. And basically what the purpose of the exercise or the intention is for you as the speaker to experience the soothing quality of listening and the exciting quality of differentiation. Okay, so you're going to be in groups of 3, and one person will be the speaker, one person is the listener, and one person is the differencer. I'm not going to say disagree, but just having a difference, or disagree, or you can be that. So basically what's going to happen is the speaker's going to just talk about one thing they feel like they learned, and then the first partner will reflect and listen and become the same, and the second partner is just simply going to begin by saying, I see it differently. And then when you hear that I see it differently, listen to what they have to say and notice what happens in your nervous system. And if you want to go one other round with the disagreeer, feel free, because the idea is for you to literally just feel how subtly your nervous system shifts depending on which of these experiences arises. So Kim and Gabe and I are the 3. All right, so do you want me to be the speaker again, Gabe and Kim, or should we switch? We practiced earlier.
No,
Do you want me to be the speaker? Probably it's just easier. Okay, I'll be the speaker, and Gabe is the listener, and Kim is going to express a difference. Express a difference. Okay. So, so one of the things that I contemplated before this call is the cultural differences that we might have. Like if you come from a highly harmonious family that doesn't tend to talk about its struggles or its disagreements, and what that might feel like, as I said, the difference between living in Salt Lake City, where the Mormon culture is highly harmonious, versus living in New York City, where people feel really free to express their differences. And I guess my concern, Gabe, is I wonder if the nervous system reacts in the same way and we don't notice it and we just keep disagreeing, or if the nervous system actually remains calm. That's a question that I have. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, let me reflect.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I heard that just prior to this call, you were actually thinking about the differences that we bring, particularly the cultural ones. And, you know, you might have been referring to me, but, you know, it might come from a more stable, like home environment, for example. And that shapes me in a particular way. And also how, you know, being in Salt Lake City, as you presenced earlier, that cultural ethos is actually tends towards sameness and away from conflict and difference, whereas it's actually a little different in New York, in the Big Apple. And this is the part where I might need some help. But what I heard you say was you have a question about whether we don't notice that we're feeling activated, and we move on to differing and maybe polarizing. You didn't use that word. Or is it that we don't or is it that our nervous system is, and that's the part that I got a little lost.
So my question is, in certain contexts, when we're differing, is our nervous system still getting excited, or is it remaining calm? And I realize that I have a hope. I just want people in the exercise to have a good experience.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I got it. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
The question to me it's kind of, I mean, I guess you can put it that way.
Hey, Kim, can you start with I want to express a difference. So, because I want everyone to start with that, if they don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I want to express a difference. I hear the questions, you frame it up, and but I also think that you know, when I even consider within my own family, and we had the same cultural setup, so to speak, my sister and I, and yet somehow I'm just a little bit more daring when it comes to being attracted to the excitement in conflict, whereas her nervous system gets activated way sooner than mine, and she probably falls more into the averse category. So even within cultures themselves, we all have that slightly different patterning, which can affect how we're going to tolerate the difference even in this.
Okay, so she's going to have to change something, guys, because I was just thinking, Kim, somehow if you could have the difference with me a little more directly, that might help a little bit.
Yeah, I was like, I'm disagreeing with the question.
Yeah. You got to disagree with me a little bit. Yeah.
Disagree with you.
Yeah.
I think this is fine. I have a different view. I think they're all going to completely feel it in their nervous systems, and they know what you're talking about. Like, no, you're worrying about it. Okay,
great. Okay. All right. Do you guys get it? Thank you. Do you get the idea? Ish. Okay, good. All right. Well, we'll experiment with it, because you're going to have 3 chances. You'll be the speaker, you'll be the reflective listener, and you'll be the disagreeer. And then each time, just notice your body and notice what your experience is, and I'm sure you'll come back with something, like Kim says. Okay? So we'll see you back here in, I would say we probably need 15 total minutes, and if you would each keep track of time, that would be great.
So welcome back from the breakouts, everybody. Diane.
Yeah, so I hope that you had enough clarity about how to do that you were able to have at least a little bit of an experience. So we're interested in hearing back from you what that was like. And also, if you're interested, if you notice that you have a hard time listening, particularly when you're excited and you want some instruction around your listening skills, we can help with that. Or if you're somebody who doesn't tend to bring your differences out enough. So where in your communication do you need support? So just some debriefing or a question about your own communication style are both welcome. And Gabe and Kim and I will just take turns facilitating your question. So I'll start, then Gabe, then Kim. Anybody?
Yeah, so once again, if you can raise your hand electronically, that would be best. Or if you want to type in a question, that's also, that'll also be fine. Kelly writes, it was a little hard to strongly express a difference. It felt more like offering another perspective. Eli says, it's harder to fake disagreement with conviction And Bob says, sorry, I have to go. Sorry. Great exercise.
Fight or flight. Fight or flight. We lost Bob.
So McKelly and Eli, I guess is his name, kind of said the same thing. It's hard to fake disagreement.
With conviction. Well, I would say that's because a lot of us spend most of our time in pluralistic culture. And within pluralistic culture, we actually practice holding multiple perspectives, and we practice having multiple points of view. But my guess is within your own family or within people that you know that have political differences from you, that it's not so difficult for that feeling to kind of take over. Is that a fair assumption, everyone?
Yeah, Kelly, you want to open your mic?
Yeah, thanks, Diane, and thanks, Miles. I think what I was noticing is I was unsure of, Diane, you mentioned the threshold of when difference becomes threat. And I think I was noticing, I kind of have an idea of the threshold for me, but feeling into what the threshold for the other person who I'm expressing it to, that's where I've got some work to do. Yeah.
Let me just reflect what I heard you say, just to make sure we're on the same page. Kelly, so what I heard you say is that that question of when the excitement, the natural life force and excitement of disagreement or of expressing a perspective turns into a threat. And while you can be in touch with that for yourself, it's a little harder to read when that actually happens for others. Is that right?
Yeah, and so I could have been stronger in my disagreement, but I didn't want to be, I didn't want to go over the top. I feel really capable of going over, passing that, but I felt,
You stopped a little short. Did you check with your partner and see whether she felt where her nervous system was or his?
Yeah, I think consensus was that I fell a little short. I could have
you
been
fell a
stronger.
little bit short. Okay, fair enough. Got it. I hear you. Good to see you, Kelly.
And Diane, Miriam Lucas's hand is up. Miriam, you want to open your mic?
Go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, so as Kelly was saying, it's hard to fake the disagreement. I must say that even though I think we all fake the disagreement, it still triggered quite a lot, we were, I think all of us in the group felt like, we want to jump in now and say a contra argument. And so even the faking already triggered us. So a real difference would probably be much higher. So I was, surprised to feel that. And so in the exercise, we could really feel what you were talking about, how the sameness made us calm and how the difference really kind of made us feel aggressive. This was very clear for us, and we also felt it in the body. Yeah, so thank you for that. It was a great experience.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. I was in Miriam's group, but just what I heard you saying, just to share the point with everyone again, is just, again, let's appreciate, like, even though in Miriam's group, everyone wasn't like fully behind their disagreement, they were just role playing, and even that activated the nervous system. So just imagine if it was the real thing, and just appreciate, she's laughing, just appreciating the experience of sameness and listening being the skill through which we create that, and just the calmness and relaxation. And then, she felt aggressive, like the difference actually brought out like a certain aggression. There was someone in the group that like noticed that like their eyebrow twitched, like they just freaked out at the disagreement, right? So
Can I actually offer a little something too, Gabe, about that?
Of course.
So one of the things that you can start noticing in your conversations is that when there's a lot of differentiation and anxiety starts to shoot up, rather than soothing with listening, often our response is to engage more to deal with the anxiety. So we start disagreeing more in order to deal with it, when in fact it's the wrong exact move. We need to start to listen to each other, and that will lower the anxiety. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Kim Loh. Or, Miles, any other question out there?
Yeah, Lynn has her hand. Lynn, you want to open your mic? Lynn Feldman? She actually wrote something in the comment or in the chat. Good.
I was with Savannah, and she brought up something that I had just been talking to a friend about, and reflectively, I so agreed with her, and it brought up trauma, it brought up anxiety, fear. It was about the current political situation. It took all of my will to not jump in on her conversation, but it triggered such a terrible reaction in me by agreeing with her.
Wow, that's interesting. So you think through your agreement with her, it actually brought online a lot of other things which had strong emotional texture for you, and you said the word triggered.
Yeah, it did. She was talking about ICE, the situation in Portland, the fact that it reminded her of brown shirts in Germany. This is just what I've been writing about and afraid of, frankly.
Mm-hmm. And what were you in the agreeer, the sameness role in that moment? Yeah.
But I broke out in chills, and I could feel my whole nervous system start to become agitated. I wasn't able to allow her to say her piece, but I mean, my hands were trembling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Kim, if I can just point out, I don't know if you're going to, but basically she built a coalition, and they're having a difference with ICE. So the energy is not relaxation, because the difference is us and them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, you built a coalition with your listener, so you two are the same, but now the difference is bigger because it's with what's happening in Portland. Does everybody see that? Because what I'm hearing in her question is, we did a listening exercise, but it really excited me, and I just want her to track. It's because the difference is still front and center in her mind. I don't know, Kim, if you're following me or not, but
I think so. I think something that I was curious about was, so if sameness is like dropping of self, dropping of own interpretations, stories, all the things that got us to this point, and really joining with the other. I think what I was curious about, Lynn, was where your own deeper stories and narratives and understandings and ruminations based on the writing that you've been doing were brought online, which actually for me, I imagine, might have taken you a little bit out of the full, maybe the full truth of what was being communicated to you, because you were now caught up in something which has more meaning for you. And that was something that I was curious about, at what point, our own reactions can actually bring a lot more in than what the other person might even be saying in their own communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And being Jewish myself, and having, I just turned 75, and when I was in school, my instructors had tattoos on their arms. So, the whole concept of the renewal of the Nazi ethic, ethos, and brown shirts really did trigger me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Diane and Gabe, I'd be totally open to, hearing if you have anything specific. Something that's coming to me in this moment is when we were writing the book, I noticed I had an ongoing kind of questioning around what are the conversations that we should be having with others so that we can engage differences, and then what kinds of conversations could we be having with others who have sameness through which we can heal and make coherent with previous experiences which might have been very disruptive and harmful and things like that. And just, I guess what I'm saying, and maybe this is integral approach, but ongoing work that's happening in parallel domains. It might be that there's something in you which would be helped by working through some of it in certain kinds of relationships and conversations, and that's a different space to one where we might want to have more political tussle around what is the right thing to do with this, like what is the action that should be taken. Do you know what I'm saying here? The multiple conversations. Yeah.
Do you want to go, Gabe?
My attention goes to Lynn. I'm curious if that resonates, and if you want to comment, Lynn.
I had just been on a conversation right before this exercise on precisely what we were talking about. Yeah. So maybe that had a lot to do with what was triggered in me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just be careful when you're talking to people and what might be stirred up, I guess, unintentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both Kim's points and Diane's points seem relevant to just our inquiry here. You're bringing your own stuff into conversations, and just to pay attention to, you joined with Savannah, but there was a difference. It was actually quite activating. Yeah. I was also turning my attention to the chat.
Kim, did you get what you needed from your inquiry just now, or?
It was just sort of open thought, nothing really sought there.
Okay, but I thought your feedback to Lynn was super helpful too. That sometimes when there's agreement, we actually hold on to ourselves, and that can carry us away too. So thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking into the chat too now too.
Gabe, is there something on the chat you want to bring in?
Well, it was just Pierre. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, brother.
Piero.
Piero. Yeah, just that listening, he's saying maybe we make a little mix. Listening doesn't automatically mean that I have no disagreements, but I'm giving my listening as consent. Diane's often fond of saying, like, listening doesn't mean that I agree with you. I'm willing to understand your point of view and what you're sharing. So it's important. Sometimes for me in the past, a resistance to listening might be, I don't want to communicate to them that I agree with them, right? And implicitly, that's driving my move to not listen. Yeah. Yeah, is there another question? And just throw it over to Di now.
Well, I have a kind of a question here, and it's where I've dabbled in like nonviolent communication, and I've done some of these exercises with Diane, but I really feel every time we get into these types of conversations, I pretty quickly feel out of my depth, which I don't feel in my normal daily life. So first, I really appreciate what Diane and Gabe and Kim are really bringing. And it just, I guess all I want to just reflect is that how different, the idea that we have are like good, authentic conversations. It's probably more the sameness. It's probably more about that sameness thing with a little bit of difference. But this is really, it's really a healthy balance of both of these is kind of seems to be kind of what you're pointing at.
Yeah, I mean, Dad, do you want to comment? You're muted. That's why we didn't hear you.
Oh,
no, Gabe,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a certain, and I learned this in just a relationship with Diane and Kim, and in my mind, in the midst of a conflict with either one of them, there's this fear of like the relationship being lost, right? But going through the difference and then being affirmed at the end of it when the provocation or the excitement and level of threat has gone away and we're back in relationship is a very affirming experience. And I've had it repeated numbers of times that I end up trusting that we'll experience the tension and we'll go right through it and we'll be in connection again. So just there is a certain free fall quality relationally that I experience when I enter conflict. So just to share that, Miles, I think it's important for us to practice that energetic, like free fall into difference, Yeah.
Yeah. Martine has her hand up. We're going to open up Martine's mic. Martine, can you open your mic? Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So just this expression that real time that when I was about to express and it didn't happen, the flood of my system was just very, very activated about this expression that wanted to happen and didn't. So it's still a little bit there. But when I was doing the exercise, I was the differentiator first, the disagreeer first, and it was hard for me to to be make a clear no, and I was softening it and saying, I think this and I think that, and realizing that. Doing that was hard for me, expressing difference. And then even when I was the speaker, I spoke from my feelings, it was hard for them to find something to disagree with me. So just noticing that in my expression.
Well, I think without just reflecting what I heard you say, Martine, one of the things that we fail to appreciate is how much unconscious creating of sameness we all do all the time. So when I used to teach conflict resolution at the University of Utah, we would study 3 basic responses to conflict. One would be to ignore or to withdraw. One would be to compete or to fight or be more aggressive. And the third thing would be to accommodate. And so every time I ask a classroom, how many of you feel that you're avoiders? There'd be a certain number of people. How many of you feel that you're competers? But the accommodators were always probably 2/3 of the room. And so, E.O. Wilson, who's this great ethnobiologist, who basically says human beings are like termites and bees and ants. We live in these highly, highly cooperative places. So the number of times that we move to create sameness during the course of a conversation is immense. And the problem with that is sometimes is that it's so habitual that it doesn't quite give us the life that we need. And so to practice a little bit tolerating the excitement of the difference, and tolerating, as someone pointed out earlier, Kelly, I think, not just the excitement in you, but the excitement that it generates in someone else is actually a tremendous skill. And so it's kind of fun to just experiment with it and see how long you can maintain the difference before you do something to soothe or to create more sameness. Does that make sense, everybody? In Israel, I do know teaching in Israel, it's a little bit different because I know as a presenter in Israel that my experience is I feel that I get tested a lot in the beginning. And if I can tolerate the difference, then I can enjoy sameness. But I don't feel that the sameness is given to me in the way it would be in the States. I feel that I get tested through my ability to handle difference.
Well, everybody who visits, all the teachers who visit Israel know that you don't come to Israel to teach, you come to Israel to argue. Which is kind of basically what it is. But when you get good at it, then you're,
yeah,
it's the same. Everybody's the same, and what stresses me out, even to this day, I've been here a dozen years. What stresses me out about this kind of the level of arguing here is completely normal for everybody else, and they're super, arguing, relaxed and calm. They walk away, and I walk away. It takes me, minutes, if not hours, to recover from it.
Gabe, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Martine.
Was there a Jennifer out there that wanted to? Oh, there you are. Yeah, I can hear you.
I was just back behind the flow. I felt so deeply I don't remember her. She's gone, and I don't remember her name, so I have to say the Jewish woman. I felt that so deeply that I was having a hard time leaving that. My husband is Jewish, and when he first heard about the situation in Portland, he went into such a state, having his own background, his family background, and it was very, very hard for him to come down from that. And I just it was difficult to move on. So that's all. And well, that's all. And then I realized it's not what this is about, and we're in a class about something, and so I took my hand down. But my heart is still, I'm so distressed about this situation myself. I find it so deeply, deeply challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yes, the issue of the concern about the signs of the rise of fascism in the country is worrying. So, but that's why I took my hand down, because.
Hey, Jennifer, can I disagree with you for just a minute?
Okay.
Okay. So another perspective just to take on is, you know, if you pick up for a moment, you know, I have my own political beliefs about what's going on, but you pick up for just a moment you know, there is a perspective that would say something along the lines of, you know, how much can a city tolerate in terms of people just not simply being willing to comply with local law, like in Seattle, right? So if you pick a fight with the feds, you better be prepared to have it. And that's another thing that I would say, is you pick a fight with the feds, and particularly when Trump's in charge, you know, have the fight when Biden's in office. Don't have it now. Why are you having it with Trump? You know he's going to do something like that. So that's just another point of view, just for the purposes of our exercise, guys. Just notice what happens when I express a difference with the perspective. Does everybody see? Okay. Because there's always another point of view. There's always a way in which we can disagree or bring up another idea. It's like, just wait for 5 months until Biden's in office and then pick up your protests. Why do it when Trump's there? You know you're going to drive him quickly into some sort of response like that. So back off for a minute. That might be another point of view to just consider. So I'm just wondering if the disagreement excited you guys. We were all in a state of agreement, or if it makes you mad.
It actually, for me, I found it interesting. I found it exciting.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
It's something to think about. I mean, to think about. I'm not
just
sure.
Just to think about. Yeah, exactly.
It moved my energy. I'll say that.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Anne has her mic open, or her hand up. Anne, would you like to open your mic?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Diane. We worked together the other night with sense making, and
good.
It's my first time in the group, and it's been very, very interesting exercise listening to everybody's experience with, and they've all been incredibly valuable. But one of the things I noticed within the group was, at the end, irrespective of whether you were the listener, the speaker, the objector, presence throughout all of it was key. And at the end of it, the ability to accommodate and the truth that was expressed, whether it was difficult to find a disagreement to the speaker, was actually what brought sameness and harmony within the group. Whether that would have been maintained or not for a greater period of time would have been an interesting exercise also, or whether difference would have occurred again. But it was very interesting to feel the energy move within the group with truth and sameness coming together at the end of the exercise. It was a very interesting experience.
That's excellent. I liked your mention specifically of awareness being that which links through all of the roles that we could take up. Sense of awareness for what we're hearing, how we react, how we bring ourselves to it. I also heard you say about the sameness that was sort of built up through that exercise together, and what would have happened if you had stayed in it. Would the energy have tended, in some expression of difference that you could then integrate and come back into wholeness? Yeah. Do you have a question about something in particular from today?
Not in particular. I thought it was very interesting, Diane's comment, how certain cultures will test you, like the Israelis in particular, the society I live in. I also have quite a lot of Israeli friends, and they love to test. It is a cultural difference. And I recognize that in myself, that I can be quite the provoker, but I recognize it, and it's also very stimulating if you have the wisdom to carry it and use it. Use it to stimulate a group. Mm-hmm. So it's not really a question. It was just a very interesting exercise and hearing everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
Well, Diane, Gabe, and Kim, we're kind of coming to the end of our 90 minutes. Do you guys want to bring us home and wrap it up, or?
We're really happy with the timing of our book, because there's a lot of intensity in the States right now, as you know, and in the work we do, there are lots of conversations going on right now about politics, about race, about gender, about sexism. It's just super alive, and our book is entitled Compassionate Conversations, and one of the things that we keep reminding each other is that we're taking a stance for a certain kind of discourse in which we're able to explore these differences with a lot of energy and a lot of truth, as you point out, and at the same time we really care about recognize our commonality, and in a certain way you could say our shared evolution. We're kind of basing our book on the idea that we don't evolve in a vacuum. We evolve because and with each other. And so that's been one thing that we're kind of standing for, is that it isn't for, let's say in the States, for Asian people or white people or black people to do the work on their own. We have to do some on our own, and we have to do a lot together. And so that's one of the stances that we're taking on this. So Kim, Gabe, do you guys want any final remarks that you want to share?
Maybe just one line that's been kind of strong in me lately is that dialogue is the cornerstone to creating social change. And I think about like a web that's unfolding and all the opportunities to have connection, to learn and be catalyzed from our differences rather than threatened and overwhelmed by them. I see it as just really linked to the changes that we are individually and collectively dreaming together. So I feel there's potency in our conversations, and that this work that we're doing on ourselves and in community is very, very worth our while. So thank you. And thank you, Miles. Great to meet you people.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, there's a friend of ours, Rob McNamara. He says, we have usually a tendency to try to solve it, right? To put an end to it, to stop it. And he invites us to consider what it would mean to allow the conflict to solve us. Meaning, how are you going to be willing to let yourself be changed, right, by the conflict? And so I think this is a particular moment where these energies, these ethnocentric energies, right, to Jennifer's point, they're coming up, and there's a lot to learn from them, and there's a lot of hopefully new possibilities that we can discover together, but we have to kind of hang in it with each other in the tension to be shaped by them. So just to share that last bit.
I have put a link for the book in the chat, compassionateconversations.com. Diane or Gabe or Kim, is there any way? I also see somebody wrote that they're involved in a reading and discussion group. Is there any activities that people can get involved with these days around compassionate conversations?
Yeah, totally. So I'll just drop in 2 links here, and Kelly, I'll speak to your question. So we have a free call, so come join us on the 31st of this month. If you click the link, you'll get the precise time. And then we're also doing a 3-hour workshop, online workshop course on August 7th, and we'll be exploring hidden biases, how to work with power dynamics, which is a big feature of why these conversations are difficult. And also we'll be exploring shadow practices. Also, we are working on the website. We'll get it up shortly on September 14th, I believe. Kim and Diane, maybe you can corroborate that. We'll start our 10-week online class. That's September 14th, I believe. Should be a Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. So if you click to the first link that Miles shared, thecompassionconversations.com, just subscribe to our email list if you're interested, and you'll get all the information on these 2 calls plus the 10-week online class.
And yeah, Diane, do you want to?
No, just thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It was really a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, great.